Thank you very much. So essentially what you saw is that the crowd is able to innovate, and the crowd is able to take knowledge, turn it into innovation, put it out there for people to solve their problems. So we go to questions.
Hello, my name is Matthew Lucas, and I'm with the Social Science and Humanity Research Council of Canada. And I'm looking at your last slide there, the different players that can have a role that can come together to innovate in this new way. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to some of the different challenges that different partners have. I mean, from our perspective in funding academic research, I'm wondering about the receptivity of academics to interacting in new ways and in different environments with different types of people, which opens up what knowledge is and who has a voice in that. But also beyond that sphere, and other governments and others, what some of the challenges are there bringing in some of those different voices.
Yeah. So I think Paddy's project, Breathing Games, is a great example of interfacing the crowd with academia and also with the private sector. And also some non-for-profit organizations that focus on respiratory diseases, right? So what do you think?
When we started the project, we were really a few people working on it. And then we started to collaborate with hospitals, with universities, and also with not-for-profit organizations. And over time, we started to spread the project, in fact, in Switzerland and in France. So we also got some funding from CHR, from the French Hospital Federation, from Switzerland. And next week, we will present the project to the WHO Respiratory Network. So I think that one really positive element in our project is that this open source, open science approach is motivating, in fact, hospitals and universities to collaborate, because they see that many small projects, for example, have started in cystic fibrosis that have been abandoned because of a lack of funding, because of a lack of people contributing. But what we're creating, even if we stop it, other people can continue to build on it. And I think this is also an interesting approach for institutions, not to have to work with commercial companies which may have other interests than the people's well-being.
Actually, from our experience with Sensorica, it was fairly easy to work with academic labs. If we address the problem with the professors, I think they find a lot of interest because there is absolutely no barrier to publication. And then we offer a path towards application of their knowledge. And we were also very successful to apply for funding by adding that value to the research, saying it can be applied in this and that. And then building interfaces, how do you bring the crowd into these academic labs, and how do you bring the students into Fab Labs and makerspaces where craziness happens. That was also prototyped. Relationships were very, very good. It was always, in a prototyping mode, but there's a lot of will to participate in this kind of collaborative process where the crowd interfaces with the academia. From my experience, it's a good response.
I'd like to go back. My name is Maria Rader. I'm the biology museum, but I'm also a co-founder of Knowledge's Makerspace in Toronto. And maybe building off that last question, I'm really specific about this specific relationship with makerspaces, because it is absolutely a not networked community. They exist now in schools, universities, as nonprofits, as their own for-profit entities. And I'm wondering about have you primarily worked with makerspaces in particular areas within universities? And if you've gone out to those ones that have membership models, how is that relationship with engaging with members of those makerspaces?
In a way, Sensorica is kind of, I wouldn't say it's a makerspace because I think it's a little bit more complex than that, but we have our own model that we've used where we've, where projects have come out of our space, where we've had different people use our space, where we've co-shared our space, have come to use materials in the lab. We have a shared 3D printer, we have shared tools. We have an actual physical location in Montreal. In terms of sort of scaling it up, this is a concept that we're trying to build. I think that the biggest challenge is, we get the question a lot of, why would you want to connect to makerspaces? Like why is that important? But, you know, if you can imagine, you know, each space addressing specific problems according to their local context, but then there's going to be overlapping things that you can share, not duplicate your resources or duplicate that knowledge. We've done a lot of networking, but not in a formalized way. And this is this project, or this proposal that we've been working on, I guess, for the last year, which Tiberius can speak a little bit more about, because he was very involved in authoring this. This is sort of our vision of how we can really apply what we've learned in the way that we've networked. And we have members that are, you know, in Australia and Europe, in the US. How can we take that and really apply it to something that's more formalized?
So there's two dimensions here. How do you connect these open spaces where the crowd gathers with traditional organizations? If there's policy people here, I think Europeans are way ahead. I think that 3 years ahead of institutionalizing these kind of relations, and there are funds, public funds for research that there are collaborative funds that require for academics and the private sector to interface with a Fab Lab or a makerspace or any type of open innovation space. So there are financial incentives to have this collaboration between the crowd, the private, and the public. I think this needs to happen here. So there is a disconnect, a formal disconnect. It's not incentivized. It's poorly understood. People still don't know why we have to connect with the crowd and where to find the crowd. You find it in these hacker spaces. And then these open spaces are not interconnected. And what we see here, we see an opportunity to build what we call a participatory economy. So all these open spaces that are mushrooming around, and we see as silos, there are informal relations, but this is actually the basis of a new economy. This is the new workspace. This is the new innovation space. So we have to think in terms of, okay, we used to have companies with offices and cubicles. Now more and more young people are like to operate within these crazy spaces, open spaces, Fab Labs, hacker spaces that have their own governance and methodologies and so on and so forth. But how do we, there's a diversity of these things, and how do we put them together into a more coherent system, right? And this is what the Verdun project proposes. For the past 40 years, we have tried hard to talk to these spaces individually and say, why don't we adopt a certain level of governance for federation and use similar IT infrastructure to be interoperable, and use some type of methodologies, create a uniform user experience across the board, because an entrepreneur needs to operate within many of these spaces at the same time, not just one. So that user experience is very important. And visibility of resources is very important. So we're talking about mapping, and management of projects across the space is also very important. So we have failed because these spaces function on a membership model, and so they perceive those who come to these spaces as their clients. Therefore, they don't want them to go to another space. So they're highly collaborative internally, but competitive externally. So our proposition was that, together, by consolidating this physical infrastructure for this participatory economy, everybody's better off. But nobody really believes it until they see it. So this project is essentially to create 5 cells or 5 open spaces of different types, and we force them into an ecosystem through shared IT infrastructure, shared governance confederation, and shared methodologies. There is no umbrella organization on top of that. There are autonomous spaces that coordinate peer-to-peer. And by injecting some money, so we work with the federal government and the provincial government. It's a close to $8 million project. We believe that we can make the case and we can demonstrate that it does work. And these operators of open spaces that are fearful that if they do it now, they're probably going to get out of business. Okay, they can't afford to pay the rent. Well, if they see this, they may join. So this kind of network is architectured in a way that is highly scalable. So other Fab Labs and makerspaces you can just plug in. So it has a scalability model. So once we demonstrate that this core works, and it's not just five spaces, we want to connect them with other services around, like crowdfunding platforms that are partners with us, academic institutions, local companies, from the private sector, and so on and so forth. So it is an ecosystem, a true ecosystem, and that IT infrastructure allows all these partners to interface with the system. So we're building the next level of structure, and I think when you think about change, stuff pops out as independent things around, and then as they get to critical mass, they have a phase change, right? A phase transition, and this is what we are trying to instigate by demonstrating that, starting with 5 spaces, you have a critical mass and enough diversity to get the ball rolling and have it for the scale.
Just a quick follow-up. Is this material available online, like open source, like this
Yes, you can come and see us, and everything we produce is completely transparent. Yeah.
I'm Patrick. I'm a PhD student at McGill University, and one of the persistent problems I find in the academic system is often instrument facilities and maintaining these facilities. On the one hand, you want to keep this accessible to as many people in the university as possible. On the other hand, you have extremely sensitive equipment that one user can very easily knock out of commission for days, weeks, months. I was wondering, from your experience in the more open community, how can we better organize our facilities, or if you would have any advice in terms of how universities can deal with managing their infrastructure?
Can't remember the last time somebody broke anything there, but I mean, we do have dirty dishes sometimes, but that's a problem everywhere. I think that, when I was presenting the 3 layers, the last one was the governance, and that's so critical to have a shared understanding of expectations, of accountability, so that, and just like any other workplace, right? You have a shared understanding of this is what the responsibilities are, and that it's not just a free-for-all, that there are rules. So yes, we've presented a very messy structure where people can come and go, but it's open, but there are rules. So in that respect, getting that, co-authoring a document and making sure that everybody has read it and understand it and can add to it. So it's not something that's just closed and finite forever, but something that we're constantly revisiting our governance document, and we're adding to it, we're debating it, and it's not always easy. There are complexities in working collaboratively, but there are also benefits and rewards from doing that as well, instead of having a very closed system. When you're working in an open environment, people feel, what my experience is that people feel more implicated emotionally, and they feel like they're part of something. So that would be my advice, is making sure that people do have a shared understanding, and that everybody has a say into shaping what that document or that agreement would be.
Yeah, maybe I think one point about the cost of the product is also if you break something and you have the ability to repair it because you have access to the documentation and all the elements that you need to repair it, then it's also easier to experiment and maybe use these products in another way than just being very careful about it and not being able to use them.
Yeah, and also concretely speaking, we worked with, for example, the Institute of Cardiology in Montreal on a project for over a year. So it was a long-term project. we had access to the academic lab. You can see Sensorica as a funnel that has reputation systems going on, and people log their contributions, their time, so you know who's doing what and how well and how much. That's what the IT infrastructure is doing. We're capturing everybody's activity, and we make that transparent for everyone. So there's a way to filter people into an asset or a space to provide access to something that is sensitive. There is a process in place. So the access to the crowd or interface with the crowd is a funnel and a filtering mechanism, saying that students can come to Fab Labs, and students come to Fab Labs and makerspaces just because they love it. But things need to happen the other way around too. The crowd needs access to these spaces, but universities, they're not going to open the doors tomorrow and here comes everybody, right, to touch things and work with things. So there's a filtering mechanism. If you do have governance in place within networks and IT infrastructure in place to have reputation systems emerge, then you can filter who from the crowd gains access according to their participation. Another thing is that scientific instruments need to change. We're talking about the sharing economy. Look at cars. They have been built for years to be owned by an individual, and they have been designed in a certain way. Now, shared cars have different properties. You can geolocate them. They have electronic switches not to go above a certain speed. They probably have sensors. When you bump into something, the car knows and it alerts the platform that something happens. So shared objects acquire new properties, and we have to, if we think about open science and think about more collaborative processes, we have to think about the labs that can become shareable, meaning the way they're designed is made to be shared, is made to provide a wider access, and also the scientific instruments, they also need to become shareable. So have sensors for monitoring if they're well manipulated. If somebody bumps it, it knows, it records that. Probably NFC access, hardware on top of them that verify the credential of the individual that wants to use it. Same thing when you open a Car2Go, it verifies your identity, your credentials, have you paid for it, do you have a driver's license, so on and so forth. So scientific instruments have to become shareable. So the same way current objects that we see around us are acquiring new properties, scientific instruments, we have to redesign them to become shareable to help open science. And not just be shareable, but also allow you to, let's say, socialize your work. If you're working with a microscope, just have one button to share that picture to an online community of researchers that look at the same problem, so they might help you in understanding something weird that you're seeing in probably real time.